Ladies and gentlemen, your mind is not your master, it's a tool. But here's the truth. Most people live their entire lives as if their mind is in charge of them. They let it dictate how they feel, how they act, and ultimately how far they go. The mind becomes the enemy not because it is designed that way, but because it's left untrained, unmanaged, and undisciplined. It's like handing a loaded weapon to a child and hoping for safety. That's the same as giving total control to an untrained mind and expecting peace, clarity, and power. You see, the mind is not meant to be the leader. It's the assistant, the executor, the processor of orders that come from a much deeper place, your will, your spirit, your inner awareness. When you confuse the mind as the leader, you become a slave to its patterns, fears, and limitations. And this is where most people fall. The mind is a machine. It is conditioned by your past experiences, your environment, what you've been told, what you've seen. It collects data, and then it runs programs based on that data. If someone told you when you were younger that you're not good enough, and that belief sank into your subconscious, your mind will keep feeding you that same story. Not because it hates you, but because that's the software it's been programmed to run. That software becomes your inner dialogue. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. What if I fail? These aren't facts. They're just echoes of a program, but the problem is, most people never realize they have the power to rewrite the code. They believe the thoughts, they trust the inner critic, and slowly they start shrinking their dreams to fit the size of their mental prison. The real danger of letting your mind control you is that it never stops working, especially when you need silence. It will overthink, overanalyze, create fear where there is none, inflate small problems into monstrous obstacles, and convince you that it's not worth it to try. It'll create imaginary threats and then act like a savior trying to protect you from them. But here's the paradox. The protection becomes the prison. You stop taking risks. You stay in comfort zones. You settle for less, not because your spirit wants to, but because your mind won't shut up. You've handed the steering wheel to fear disguised as logic, worry disguised as caution, hesitation disguised as analysis. Now, let's be honest. Your mind can be brilliant. It can calculate, strategize, solve problems, imagine, and innovate. But only when it's in alignment with your purpose, only when it's directed by something higher than fear. The issue isn't thinking, the issue is overthinking without direction. The problem isn't the mind, it's letting the mind run without supervision. That's like having a Ferrari engine with no brakes, no GPS, and a blindfolded driver. Fast, powerful, but completely lost. If you don't learn how to separate yourself from the noise in your head, you'll never know who you really are. You are not the thoughts. You are the awareness behind the thoughts. You're not the panic, the doubt, the self-judgment. You're the one who sees all of it. You have to understand this. The voice in your head that tells you you're not ready isn't prophetic, it's programmed. It's not wise, it's wounded, and you don't have to obey it. You can watch it, challenge it, starve it. You can choose new thoughts. You can feed your mind with discipline, clarity, and truth until the old voice has nothing left to say. When you begin to take control of your thoughts, even subtly, you begin to see cracks in the illusion. You start to realize that just because a thought is loud doesn't mean it's true. Just because a feeling is strong doesn't mean it's accurate. And just because your mind is spinning doesn't mean your life is falling apart. The power lies in your ability to observe, not absorb, to witness, not react, to challenge, not comply. Start paying attention to how your mind reacts to discomfort. Notice how it tries to avoid anything uncertain. It will beg you to stay in bed, stay small, stay hidden. It will flood you with reasons to quit. But understand this, comfort is the drug and your mind is the dealer. Every time you obey the fear, you strengthen its grip. Every time you hesitate, the mind takes the win. But every time you act in spite of the fear, you train your mind to follow your lead. You teach it that you are the authority, not the other way around. You train your body to lift weights. You train your reflexes to respond under pressure. But have you trained your mind to obey? Have you taught it who's boss? Most haven't. That's why they stay stuck. That's why they let emotions run wild and thoughts spiral into anxiety. That's why one rejection feels like the end of the world, because no one ever taught them that the mind must be dominated, not worshipped. That the mind must be given orders, not freedom to wander. You don't need to kill your mind, you need to command it. You don't need to fight your thoughts, you need to replace them. This isn't about shutting your brain off, it's about waking up your awareness and stepping into command. People believe the myth that peace of mind is about eliminating all negative thoughts. That's wrong. True peace comes from no longer being afraid of them, because you see them and you don't bow to them. Because you hear the voice of fear and you act anyway. Because you feel the doubt and you move anyway. Because you've trained your mind to listen, not lead. Every single thought that enters your mind is a seed, and every seed carries with it the potential to grow into something massive, powerful, and tangible. What you allow yourself to dwell on, whether consciously or unconsciously, is exactly what you begin to manifest in your outer world. This isn't a poetic metaphor, this is a law of life, as real and unforgiving as gravity. Your current life, your circumstances, your habits, and even your emotional patterns are the physical outcomes of the thoughts you've been entertaining over time. If you keep feeding your mind with ideas of limitation, fear, inadequacy, and confusion, you're not just entertaining negativity. You're building your future with it. The mind is not passive. It doesn't observe thoughts without consequence. It acts on them. It shapes reality according to the most dominant ones. Most people have no idea how powerful their thoughts are because they've never taken the time to observe what they're actually thinking. They live in reaction, in autopilot, and in emotional chaos because they never learned how to become the thinker instead of the thought. If you wake up each day and your first thought is dread, anxiety, or not again, you've already begun to script how the day unfolds. Your internal state writes the blueprint for your external world. That's why people who are constantly stuck in self-pity, complaining, or anger can't seem to break free, because their mind keeps replaying the same internal script, and the world outside responds like a mirror. You aren't attracting misery, you're generating it by permission of unchecked thoughts. Let's say you walk into a room and immediately assume that people are judging you. That thought might seem small, but it becomes the lens through which your mind processes everything. You start feeling insecure, you avoid eye contact, you stop speaking freely. Now the external world begins to respond to that energy, and suddenly you're reinforcing your original belief. It was a thought that triggered a feeling, which influenced a behavior, which created a result, which then became a new truth in your mind. But it all began with that single, unchallenged thought, and this is happening all day, every day. People wonder why they can't seem to break cycles in their relationships, finances, or mental health, but they never stop to question the thought patterns that feed those cycles. They want change, but they haven't changed their thinking. And that's the root of the problem. Your mind will serve whatever dominant thoughts you feed it. If your dominant thoughts are about lack, pain, rejection, and failure, your mind will begin filtering out opportunities for growth and fixate only on threats. You'll start seeing obstacles where none exist. You'll sabotage relationships, success, and joy because your mind is aligning your behavior with your dominant internal narrative. That's why changing your circumstances starts long before the world around you changes. It starts with altering the patterns of thought that are generating your emotional and behavioral responses. You don't break free by changing the world. You break free by changing your interpretation of it. But let's go deeper. People think that thoughts are random, like mental clouds floating by. That's not true. They're conditioned. Your environment, upbringing, past trauma, society, and media have programmed your thinking to a great extent. If you grew up hearing money doesn't grow on trees, then even as an adult, your mind may associate financial abundance with guilt or danger. If you were constantly criticized as a child, your internal dialogue will likely carry echoes of that criticism long after the external voice has vanished. The thoughts you entertain are often not yours. They are inherited mental scripts you didn't ask for, didn't examine, but still obey. And until you decide to interrupt them and replace them, they'll keep running your life. One of the biggest lies people believe is that they need to wait to feel better before they can think differently. That's backward. You don't wait for the emotion to change, you change the thought first. Feelings are the children of thoughts. You feel sad because of a thought. You feel empowered because of a thought. You feel helpless because of a thought. So if you want to overcome negative feelings, don't wrestle with the emotion. Go upstream to the source and change the narrative. Start speaking new thoughts even if they feel fake. Repetition is what imprints beliefs. Think the thought often enough and your subconscious starts accepting it as truth. That's not delusion, that's neural reprogramming, and that's how transformation begins. But this isn't just about positive thinking, it's about accurate thinking. It's about aligning your thoughts with what you want to create rather than what you fear might happen. If you constantly imagine failure, your behavior will reflect caution, hesitation, and fear. If you imagine growth, mastery, and confidence, you'll act accordingly. The thought you water is the one that grows, and make no mistake, your brain doesn't care whether the thought is helpful or harmful. It simply repeats what it's told the most. That's why you can't afford to entertain negative thoughts, even casually. Even a thought you joke about, like "I'm such a loser," is planting a seed your subconscious might take seriously. You must take responsibility for what you allow your mind to repeat. The moment you do, you take back your power. Your mind is like a factory, and your thoughts are the raw material. Garbage in, garbage out. Precision in, power out. You can create a reality of despair, doubt, and depression. Or you can create one of purpose, clarity, and dominance. It all starts in the mental environment you permit to exist. You become what you think about, not sometimes, not occasionally, always. There are no neutral thoughts. Everyone is steering your life in a direction. The question is, are you steering or are you just being pulled? When you begin to understand the cause and effect relationship between your thoughts and your destiny, life becomes less mysterious. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming a creator of outcomes. You stop blaming external situations and start auditing your internal dialogue. Because once you recognize that your thoughts are the architects of your future, you'll no longer casually entertain fear, gossip, complaint, or doubt. You'll begin to guard your mind like a fortress because you'll understand that what you let in will eventually build your life. Repetition is the secret doorway into the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is where real change happens. Most people try to change their lives through force, through willpower, through temporary bursts of motivation, but they forget that the deeper layer, the subconscious, is always stronger than conscious effort. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your patterns, and your patterns are stored deep in the mind, developed over years of repetition, exposure, and reinforcement. You act a certain way, react emotionally in specific ways, and make decisions based on the programs running beneath the surface. Those programs didn't appear out of nowhere. They were written, line by line, by thoughts and words you repeated to yourself or accepted from others. If you grew up hearing that you're not smart enough, strong enough, or that you'll never succeed, those words became beliefs, not overnight, but over time. Repetition turned ideas into identity. The mistake people make is thinking that a single affirmation or moment of clarity can overwrite years of negative conditioning. It won't. The mind doesn't respond to inspiration alone. It responds to repetition. Think about how you learned your name. It wasn't a one-time thing. You heard it thousands of times. You responded to it again and again until it became automatic. Now, imagine doing the same with empowering beliefs. Imagine repeating to yourself daily, "I am capable, I am focused, I am disciplined, I am enough," until your subconscious begins to accept that as its default setting. At first, it feels like a lie. That's normal. Your current mental programming doesn't match the new thought yet. But if you persist, if you hammer that belief into your brain through relentless repetition, it starts to imprint, it starts to feel familiar. And once a thought feels familiar, the mind stops rejecting it. That's when the transformation begins to take root. You can't rewire your brain by thinking something once. You have to install the thought through consistent, intentional repetition. It's like training a muscle. You don't go to the gym one time and expect to be strong forever. You repeat the reps. You build the habit. You teach your body that this is the new normal. Your mind works the same way. You have to show up daily with discipline and speak life into yourself over and over until the old voice, the voice of fear, doubt, insecurity, fades into the background. It never fully disappears, but it loses power. And that's the goal. You don't have to eliminate the old programming entirely. You just have to overwrite it with something stronger. The people who seem unshakable, confident, driven, they aren't born that way. They trained their minds to think differently. They fed their subconscious with empowering beliefs so consistently that it became second nature. That's the result of repetition. And here's the truth most won't admit. Your mind is always being programmed. If you don't take control of that process, someone else will. The news, social media, toxic people, your past, they're all whispering messages into your mind. And if you're not deliberate about what you allow in, you're just absorbing whatever the world throws at you. That's why repetition must be intentional. It's not just about repeating positive phrases. It's about curating your mental environment. Every word you speak to yourself is a vote. Every thought you dwell on is a rehearsal. Every day you repeat empowering beliefs, you're building a new identity brick by brick. This is also why negative self-talk is so destructive. Every time you say, I can't do this, I'm not ready, I always mess things up, your subconscious listens. And because the subconscious doesn't judge, it only records and responds. It begins shaping your behavior around that belief. The repetition of doubt becomes your new normal. You hesitate more, you fear more. You back away from challenges not because they're impossible, but because your programming tells you that you can't handle them. But when you flip the script, when you start feeding your mind with powerful, affirmative language, you create a new internal compass. One that points toward action, strength, and clarity instead of fear, avoidance, and weakness. The challenge is that repetition is boring. People want excitement, they want novelty, but repetition doesn't care about your emotions. It cares about results. You might not feel like speaking affirmations. You might feel silly journaling the same powerful beliefs day after day. But if you do it anyway, your subconscious begins to adapt. It starts saying, maybe this is who I am now. And when the subconscious starts to believe something, your actions begin to change automatically. You don't have to fight yourself anymore. You don't have to battle resistance at every step. Your new mental software begins running in the background, and suddenly you start showing up differently. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. This is why you must guard your words, your thoughts, your rituals. Repetition doesn't take breaks. If you spend 10 minutes every morning declaring your power, but then spend the rest of the day complaining, doubting, or comparing yourself, the dominant message will win. That's how repetition works. It doesn't care about short bursts of effort. It obeys the loudest, most consistent voice. You must decide which voice will be dominant in your life. Will it be the voice of your higher self, the one that believes, acts, and creates, or the voice of your old patterns, the one that retreats, fears, and resists? You don't need more motivation. You don't need another breakthrough. You need repetition, daily, ruthless, relentless. You need to rewire your mind the same way it was wired in the first place, through time, exposure, and reinforcement, the same way you memorized the alphabet. The same way you learned to drive, repetition. You learned helplessness through repetition. You accepted fear through repetition. Now it's time to break that cycle the same way, by choosing better thoughts and repeating them until they become who you are. Emotion is not the enemy, it's energy, pure and simple. Raw power flowing through your system with one purpose, to move you. That's why it's called emotion, energy in motion. But most people were never taught how to handle this power. They suppress it, deny it, or let it consume them. They either bottle it up until it explodes or allow it to take full control of their decisions, actions, and reactions. They don't realize that emotion is neither good nor bad, it's a signal. It's not there to control you, it's there to be directed by you. And if you fail to learn how to direct it, your life becomes chaotic. It becomes reactionary. One moment you're motivated, the next moment you're broken. One small trigger can ruin an entire day, all because the energy within you is moving, but you haven't learned how to steer it. Think about anger. Most people fear anger because they've seen it destroy relationships, careers, even lives. But anger isn't the problem, lack of control is. Anger, when directed, becomes power. It becomes fuel. It becomes intensity and conviction and drive. The same emotion that can lead to destruction can also lead to transformation. The difference lies in direction. The difference lies in whether you own the emotion or whether the emotion owns you. It's not about being emotionless. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent, learning to feel everything but choosing to act only on what serves your higher purpose. Sadness, too, is energy. It's heavy, slow, dragging energy, but it carries meaning. It often comes to teach you something, to show you where you've neglected yourself or stayed stuck too long in the wrong places. Most people drown in it. They try to escape it through distraction, addiction, or denial. But if you sit with it, breathe into it, and then channel it into reflection, writing, healing, or creativity, it becomes fuel. That same sadness can be the seed of your greatest clarity, but only if you choose to move it, not wallow in it, not suppress it, but convert it. Every emotion carries within it the potential to transform your life if you learn the skill of redirection. Fear is another misunderstood emotion. Fear doesn't show up to stop you, it shows up to prepare you. It's a warning system, an internal signal that you're stepping into unfamiliar territory. But instead of listening and taking guided, courageous action, most people retreat. They let fear define the borders of their life. They mistake discomfort for danger. They sit still when they should be moving. But when you begin to understand that fear is just energy pointing at what matters to you, what you care about, what you want to protect, what you secretly desire, you can learn to face it with new eyes. You don't run from it, you ride it like a wave, you feel the fear and still act, knowing that action is the ultimate transformer of fear. Every time you step through fear it shrinks, but every time you bow to it, it grows stronger. This is what most people never learn. Emotions are not meant to be obeyed, they are meant to be mastered. That doesn't mean you pretend to be positive all the time. That's not mastery, that's delusion. Mastery means presence. It means when the emotion shows up, you're aware of it. You allow it to be there without shame, but you choose how to respond. You don't numb it, you don't lash out, you don't surrender to it. You breathe, you feel, you listen, and then you lead it. You take that energy and point it in a direction that supports your growth, your mission, your integrity. You have to start viewing yourself as the commander of your internal state. Not a victim of feelings, not a servant to your moods. The same way a skilled martial artist uses the force of an opponent against them, you use the intensity of your emotions to push yourself forward. You use pain to build resilience, you use frustration to develop focus, you use heartbreak to awaken hunger, you don't resist the storm, you become the one who knows how to navigate it. The weather might be wild, but the pilot is trained. But here's what separates those who rise from those who collapse: intention. You must become intentional with your emotional energy. You must ask yourself daily, where am I placing my energy? Are you letting anger drive you to vengeance, or are you letting it sharpen your purpose? Are you allowing sadness to make you spiral, or are you using it as a moment of reflection and self-honesty? Are you letting fear keep you stagnant, or are you turning it into courage by taking the first step anyway? And this isn't a one-time process, it's a lifestyle. Every day, emotions will rise. That's part of being alive. They're not going anywhere, but the question is, what will you do with them? Will you waste that energy by reacting blindly, or will you harness it like fuel to burn through every limitation you've placed on yourself? Every time you take emotional energy and redirect it with purpose, you become stronger. You become more grounded. You begin to realize that nothing outside of you can truly control you, not if you've trained yourself to master the inside. That's when you start living on a different level. That's when your emotions become your allies, not your enemies. People who are successful, fulfilled, and mentally strong aren't those who never feel down, discouraged, or afraid. They feel everything, sometimes more deeply than most. But they've developed the muscle of emotional redirection. They've trained themselves to feel fully, then move powerfully. They turn pain into progress. They turn chaos into clarity. They turn emotional turbulence into mental fortitude. They don't suppress their emotions. They convert them into forward motion. That's a skill, a discipline, and it changes your entire experience of life. Most people are afraid of emotion because they've never been taught how to handle it. They think it's either explosion or repression, chaos or numbness, but there's a third path: transmutation. You take what's dark, heavy, wild, and intense within you, and you forge it into light, precision, and purpose. You don't run from yourself, you don't hide from your depth. You meet every emotion with strength and guidance. You become the architect of your internal world, not a lost tenant inside of it. You choose what to build. You choose what to feel, and more importantly, you choose what to do with that feeling. Discipline is not just about routines and rules, it's about identity. It's the bridge between who you are and who you want to become. And when you're surrounded by doubt, when your mind starts whispering lies, when everything inside of you wants to quit, discipline is the weapon that cuts through the noise. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for motivation. It doesn't care how you feel. Discipline simply does. And in a world where most people are driven by mood, comfort, and emotion, discipline is what sets you apart. It's the rare, sharp edge that turns average into unstoppable. It's the thing that silences the inner enemy and puts your soul back in charge. Doubt doesn't appear in your life because you're weak. It appears because your mind is always scanning for reasons to protect you from failure. That's what it's wired to do: keep you safe, but safety is the enemy of growth. Safety is the reason people stay in dead-end jobs, toxic relationships, and mental prisons. Doubt shows up the second you try to step outside that safety. And the only way to overpower that doubt is not through inspiration or positive thinking. It's through action. Repetitive, consistent, sometimes boring action. That's what builds discipline. That's what reclaims your power. Because once you start moving, doubt begins to shrink. It can't survive in the presence of action. It only grows in silence, stagnation, and hesitation. Discipline is the process of teaching your mind to obey you. Most people live the other way around. They're ruled by their thoughts. "I don't feel like it" becomes their anthem, but discipline doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't wait for the stars to align. It's a decision, a daily decision, to show up regardless. And every time you do something hard, something you didn't feel like doing, you're sending a message to your mind: I'm in charge now. You start to build self-trust. You begin to believe in your own word. Not because you feel confident, but because your actions prove it. This is where real power comes from. Not hype, not external validation, but from the quiet, consistent act of doing what needs to be done. You want to feel good. You want confidence. You want clarity. Then build discipline. Because confidence doesn't come from standing in front of the mirror screaming affirmations. It comes from evidence. It comes from a track record. It comes from doing what you said you'd do over and over until your mind has no choice but to believe that you're capable. That's how you shift identity, not overnight, but brick by brick through the repetition of discipline. And here's the secret no one talks about: discipline doesn't get easier, you just get stronger. The voice in your head that says skip it today never completely goes away, but with time its volume gets lower, its influence gets weaker, and your ability to override it becomes second nature. That's the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs act when they feel like it. Professionals act because that's who they are. They don't wait to feel aligned. They create alignment through discipline. They know that feelings follow action, not the other way around. Doubt is not something you eliminate. It's something you learn to walk through, and discipline is what allows you to do that. It becomes the armor you wear when your confidence is shaky. It becomes the compass you follow when you feel lost. It becomes the routine that carries you through the chaos. When you build discipline, you give yourself something to lean on when life hits hard. Because life will hit hard, people will doubt you, you'll face failure, you'll lose momentum, you'll feel tired, but discipline doesn't flinch, it doesn't break, it bends, but it doesn't fall. And when you've trained yourself to show up, no matter what, that's when you become dangerous. People waste years waiting for motivation. They chase inspiration like it's some magical key, but they never stop to realize that the real key has been within them the whole time. Discipline. It's not flashy. It doesn't feel exciting, but it works. It's the engine behind every great achievement, every transformation, every victory. Discipline is the silent force moving behind the scenes while everyone else is still planning, still hoping, still waiting. And if you make it your default, you'll start to separate from the crowd. Not because you're more talented, but because you're more trained. You want to feel less anxious. Build discipline. You want to stop overthinking. Build discipline. You want to break through resistance, fear, and fatigue. Build discipline. Because when your mind knows that you will act regardless of how you feel, it starts to quiet down. It stops trying to distract you. It stops trying to sabotage you, it realizes you've taken back control, and that's when the real shift happens. That's when the inner enemy starts to lose its grip. Because discipline is the evidence your subconscious needs to believe that you are no longer at the mercy of your doubts, your emotions, or your past. That's why discipline is everything. It's not about being robotic. It's not about killing your joy. It's about creating freedom through structure, strength through repetition, power through consistency. Every time you show up when it's hard, every time you act when it's inconvenient, you're building a version of yourself that no longer negotiates with weakness. You're becoming someone who leads, who acts, who conquers. You're teaching your mind that you've outgrown your excuses, that you're not here to survive, you're here to dominate, and that's only possible when discipline becomes your new standard.